She was given no name by her pack. Then the Alpha King named her his mate. The mountains loomed like jagged teeth against the dying light, their peaks swallowed in mist. Shadows crept across the valleys, moving silently with the wind, and in those shadows walked a girl who had no name. Not even her pack, the ones she had called family, had dared to name her. She was a shadow among wolves, a whisper in the dark. Some said it was a curse, others said it was fate, but she did not care. Names were chains, and she had learned to walk unbound. She moved through the underbrush with quiet steps, her senses sharper than any wolf in her pack. Her eyes, pale as moonlight, reflected the dying sun, and her hair, dark as raven wings, flowed around her shoulders. She had learned early that strength alone did not guarantee survival. Fear kept the others in line, but she had long since learned to walk beyond fear. Her pack hunted her not because she was weak, but because she was different.
There were whispers when she passed. The nameless shadow wanders alone.
Children shivered at her glance. Elders muttered that she carried death with her, and she did not deny it. She had seen things in the dark, shadows that moved without shape, voices that whispered her name even when no one spoke. Tonight, the wind carried more than whispers. It carried the distant rumble of hooves, strong, steady, purposeful. She paused, ears twitching, and her body went still. She was not afraid, but she was curious, a rare spark in her heart flickering to life. Few dared approach the mountains, and fewer still dared approach her. From the crest of the hill, he appeared, a figure cloaked in the stormlight, his presence commanding even from a distance. He rode alone, a king among shadows, the alpha of a realm that stretched far beyond her imagination. His eyes, sharp and golden, scanned the mountains with a predator's grace, and then they found her. For a moment, the world seemed to shrink. The wind died down. Even the shadows seemed to hold their breath. They'd be girl without a name, the one who survived the forbidden rites, the one who wandered beyond the reach of men and wolves alike. And now, here she was, more real than any tale, more alive than he had imagined. She did not bow or show fear. Most would have knelt before an Alpha King, yet she stood tall, a shadow unmoved by light or command. There was defiance in her, sharp and bright, and he felt it cut through the pride that had built around him for years.
"You are the one they call the Nameless," he said, his voice low but carrying across the hill.
The wind caught his words, and they seemed to echo in the valleys. You survive where others fall. You are strong, but not free. She tilted her head, her eyes narrowing. I am free enough to leave when I choose, she said. Her voice was soft yet firm, carrying an edge that could pierce stone. He dismounted with ease, landing silently on the ground like a shadow among shadows. Every movement spoke of power honed over decades, of command accepted without question. And yet, when he approached her, there was curiosity, an unusual softness behind his golden gaze. You wander alone, he said, circling her as if testing her, reading her like an open book. Yet the world will not leave you be. Shadows follow you. Powers you do not understand are waking inside you. They call to me as much as they called to you. She did not answer. Instead, she studied him, noting the tension in his shoulders, the weight of responsibility that seemed to press down even on someone so strong. She had seen leaders before, wolves who commanded obedience through fear. But there was something different about him. He was danger and sanctuary both, a storm in flesh and blood. Finally, he spoke again, and his words were like a hammer striking iron. You belong to no one, yet I will claim you. Claim me, she whispered, more to herself than him. Yes, he said, stepping closer, his presence overwhelming her senses. You will be my mate. By the laws of my kingdom, by the bond that fate has written, you are mine. For a heartbeat, she felt the mountains shift beneath her feet. The wind howled through the peaks, carrying with it the scent of storm and danger. The trees seemed to lean toward him as if acknowledging his power. Her heart raced, not with fear, but with something unfamiliar, something she could not name. "You dare?" she began, her voice trembling with a mixture of anger and disbelief. "I am nothing. I am no one." "Oh, can you?" He lifted a hand, not in threat, but in silent command. "I see what you are. I see the strength you hide, the fire you deny. You are more than nameless. You are the one who will walk beside me in storm and shadow. Whether you accept it or not, destiny has brought us together." The words fell like heavy snow, and she felt them settle into her bones. She wanted to refuse. She wanted to run, to disappear into the folds of the mountains as she always had. And yet there was a pull she could not resist, a thread woven through her very being that called to him. Before she could answer, the ground trembled, and a howl rose from the valley below, a warning, a challenge, a herald of danger. Her pack had noticed the Alpha King, and they were not pleased. "Go back," she hissed at him, fear finally touching her voice. "They will kill you." He smiled, a faint curve of lips that carried both amusement and warning. "Let them try. I do not fear your path. Not when I have found you." Suddenly, shapes emerged from the mist, wolves larger than any she had seen, eyes glowing with suspicion and rage. Her pack surrounded him, circling like the storm itself had taken shape in flesh and fur. Yet he stood unmoving, calm, unyielding. One of the wolves, the one who led them in her absence, stepped forward and bared his teeth. "You have no right," he growled. "She is ours. No human, no king may claim what belongs to the pack."
"She belongs to no one,"
she said, finally finding her voice.
"Not to you."
Not to anyone. The Alpha King's eyes softened, and he glanced at her with something she had never seen in another soul, recognition, not of her body, not of her power, but of her very essence. "Then let me be the first to claim what you cannot take from yourself." "Bah," he said, his words like fire in the night. Her heart thumped violently. She did not understand why his words struck her so deeply, why the thought of being claimed made her feel both trapped and alive. She wanted to resist, yet every instinct in her body whispered that this was no ordinary man, no ordinary bond. There was something eternal in his gaze, a promise of storms weathered together, of shadows embraced rather than feared. Her pack growled, closing in, but she stepped forward, placing herself between him and them. "If you want to take me, you must pass me first," she said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her chest. The wolves hesitated, sensing her resolve, sensing the unusual power in both her and the man who claimed her. The Alpha King watched silently, his golden eyes locked on hers, a silent challenge passing between them. Finally, he reached out, not with force, but with a gesture that held both command and reverence. He touched her hand, and for a moment, the mountains seemed to fall silent. The wind stilled. Even the wolves paused, as if the world itself acknowledged the bond being forged. "You are mine," he whispered. "A promise, not a threat." Her chest tightened. She wanted to pull away, to deny him, to run into the mist and never look back. Yet she could not. The thread that connected them pulled tight, binding her to a destiny she had never imagined. The pack snarled and retreated, unwilling to confront the Alpha King. But their eyes never left her. She was still nameless in their eyes, still a shadow, but the man before her had named her, and that was enough to change everything. She looked up at him, her eyes wide, and whispered, almost too softly for even the wind to carry, "Why me?" He smiled, the storm in his gaze softening just enough to reveal the man beneath the alpha. "Because you are not afraid of yourself," he said. "Because you are stronger than anyone knows. And because, without you, I am incomplete." She did not understand the depth of his words, nor the power that lay behind them. She only knew that something inside her had shifted, that the mountains, the shadows, and even the night itself would never be the same again. And as the sun finally sank behind the peaks, leaving the world bathed in twilight, she realized that her life had changed forever. She had been given no name by her pack, but now, by the Alpha King, she had a place, a bond, a destiny. The storm was coming. She could feel it in her bones, and so was he. And she would not run from either. The fortress rose from the cliffs like a black crown, its spires clawing at the sky. Lightning split the clouds, revealing the jagged stone walls and the heavy gates that no ordinary traveler could pass. She had never imagined a place like this. Even in the wild mountains she called home, no dwelling carried such weight, such presence. The fortress seemed alive, as if it breathed and watched, as if it could sense who belonged and who did not. The Alpha King led her through the gates without ceremony, his golden eyes always upon her, steady, commanding, yet strange with curiosity. Every step echoed through the halls, stone corridors lined with banners that spoke of battles long past, of kings and queens whose names had faded into legend. She felt small, insignificant, but the pull of the Alpha's presence kept her grounded. She could not flee. "Not yet. You are not a guest here," he said, his voice low, carrying the weight of authority. "You are mine. That is not an opinion. That is a law of blood and bond." She walked beside him, her hands clenched at her sides. She had never been anyone's possession, and the idea made her chest tighten with a mixture of fear and defiance.
"I am not your mate," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "Not yet. I do not understand you. This claim."
"How can you know me? How can you even say I belong to you?" He stopped suddenly, turning to face her. The storm outside flared, and lightning etched his sharp features with brilliance. "I know you," he said simply. "Stronger than most, sharper than many, and yet lonely in ways that even you do not understand. I do not claim you because I wish to own you. I claim you because fate has written our bond in the stars and because the power inside you cannot walk alone." She shook her head, trying to dispel the knot of emotions tightening in her chest. "Power! I am nothing but shadows," she whispered, almost to herself. "Shadows and whispers. I do not belong anywhere, and I never will." He smiled faintly, a gesture that held warmth in its rarity. "Then perhaps it is time you learned to belong, not to anyone else, but to yourself, and through that, to me." The halls were cold, their stone biting against her skin, but the Alpha's presence seemed to ward the chill, a protective warmth that wrapped around her despite her stubborn resistance. As they moved deeper into the fortress, the doors of the council chambers opened before them. Advisors and soldiers fell silent, their eyes turning to the girl who had been given no name. Murmurs spread like fire in dry grass. Some were whispers of awe, others of suspicion, and a few carried open disdain. She sensed it all but kept her gaze fixed on the floor, unwilling to give them the satisfaction of seeing her reaction.
"Your presence here is unexpected," one of the older advisors said, his voice steady but edged with tension.
"She is, unknown Alpha? The pack she comes from? They are wild, unpredictable, The king said sharply, his tone brooking no argument. She walks in shadows and survives. The king said sharply, "That is strength enough. If you cannot see it, then you are blind." The girl felt a flutter of something unfamiliar, pride, perhaps, or the warmth of protection. She had never been defended before, not truly. The Alpha King's words were like fire in the cold fortress halls, warming her in ways she could not name. Days passed in a blur of lessons, patrols, and introductions. She was given quarters within the fortress, a room that overlooked the cliffs, where the wind howled like a living thing. Every night, the storm seemed to call to her, tugging at the shadows she carried, whispering of power she could not yet fully understand. The Alpha visited her often, sometimes silently, sometimes speaking of things beyond her comprehension. History, battles, curses, and the fragile threads of destiny that bound them both. She resisted his presence, pulling away with every word, yet secretly listening, absorbing, learning. "You fear me," he said one evening as they stood on the cliffside balcony, watching the storm churn over the mountains. His hand rested lightly on the railing, his golden gaze piercing hers. "And yet you do not run." "I do not run," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I cannot, not when the mountains themselves seem alive. They whisper warnings, but I cannot leave." "You feel it," he said softly. "The power inside you, the shadows that watch, that speak. You are not just a girl. You are a force that could reshape this kingdom or destroy it." She swallowed hard. "And if I cannot control it, then I will stand beside you," he said. "I have never faltered, not in battle, not in blood. And I will not falter now." The words were simple, yet they struck her deeply. No one had ever promised such steadfastness. No one had ever offered her companionship without expectation, without chains. Yet she resisted, because trust was a language she did not know, and vulnerability was a path she feared to tread. The days became weeks, and whispers of rebellion began to stir. Rival packs, jealous of the Alpha King's strength, and wary of the girl who walked beside him, sent spies to test her, to provoke her, to see if she was weak. She met them with courage, using her shadow affinity to move unseen, to evade confrontation. Each encounter strengthened her, yet also drew her closer to the Alpha, who watched her quietly, approving, but never intrusive. One night in the fortress gardens, where roses bloomed even in storm, she stumbled upon a vision. Shadows twisted around her fingers, forming shapes that whispered of danger and loss. She realized she was seeing glimpses of a curse, one that had followed the Alpha for years, one that could claim him if she faltered in her trust. Her heart tightened. She wanted to flee, to return to the mountains where nothing could reach her, where she could hide in shadows without consequence. But the Alpha found her before she could move, stepping out from the mist like a guardian. "You saw it," he said quietly, his hand brushing against her shoulder. Not a touch of ownership, but of reassurance. "The curse."
"It has haunted me since birth, but it fears what is true."
You might be the only one who can face it with me." She shook her head, fear and frustration swirling in her chest.
"I am no one. I cannot help anyone, not even myself."
"How can I stand against what haunts you?" He knelt beside her, golden eyes soft but resolute. "Because you are not alone. I am here, and together we will face what comes." For the first time, she felt the weight of something greater than survival, greater than fear. She felt a connection, a bond that called to her very soul. And yet, trust did not come easily. Every nerve in her body screamed to retreat, to test him, to see if his words were hollow. The following days brought more trials. A messenger arrived with news of a rival pack seeking to invade the Alpha King's territory. She was forced to join the scouts, moving alongside warriors she barely knew. Yet each step beside the Alpha King reminded her of the invisible tether connecting them. During the skirmishes, she watched him fight, not with rage, but with calculated power, a storm wrapped in flesh. He protected his people, his lands, and in that moment, she understood a fragment of why he had chosen her. She, too, had survived impossible trials, walked paths of shadows, and yet remained unbroken. One night, after the battle had been won but at a cost, she found herself alone on the cliffs, looking out at the horizon where storm clouds clashed with moonlight. She thought of her pack, of the mountains that had raised her, and of the Alpha King, whose presence was no longer a threat but a challenge to her heart. "You are thinking of him," a voice whispered in the shadows, not human, not fully, but the echo of the power within her speaking. "Do you belong to him or to the shadow?" She closed her eyes, feeling the storm inside her as much as the storm outside. She did not have the answer. Perhaps she did not want one yet. When she turned, he was there, standing silently, watching her. His presence was steady, unwavering, yet gentle in a way that spoke of trust he did not force, but offered. "You are restless," he said, "and yet you stay." "I do not know where else to go," she admitted, voice small but honest. "Then stay," he said simply, "not because you are bound to me, but because you choose to be." She did not answer, because words would fail. She could feel it, the pull, the tension, the undeniable spark that bound them in ways neither could fully comprehend. And in that silence, the world seemed to pause, holding its breath as the storm raged around them. But danger was never far. From the horizon, a shadow approached, an emissary of the rival packs, carrying news that would shatter the fragile peace of the fortress. The Alpha King's gaze darkened. "It begins," he said, "and we must face it together." Her heart pounded. For the first time, she understood the truth of his claim. Being his mate meant more than ceremony or title. It meant facing storms, shadows, and choices that would define both their fates. And in that realization, she felt something else, a spark of courage and a fragile, growing trust that perhaps she did not have to walk alone. The wind whipped through the cliffside, carrying with it the promise of trials to come, and the girl who had been given no name stood tall, ready to meet them, not as a shadow, but as something more. The fortress had never felt heavier. Shadows clung to the stone walls, thick and restless, as if the building itself feared what was coming. The storm outside roared like a living creature, wind and rain battering the cliffs with unrelenting force. Within, the halls were quiet, almost too quiet, as though every servant and soldier held their breath, waiting for the inevitable. She wandered through the corridors, her hands brushing the cold stone, feeling the pulse of the fortress in her fingertips. The Alpha King had left hours ago to meet with scouts and advisors, leaving her alone with her thoughts, and the shadows inside her began to stir. They had been quiet for so long, whispers in the dark, but now they grew louder, a low hum vibrating through her bones. She did not fear the shadows. They had been her companions for as long as she could remember, but there was something different now, something sharp and urgent, a pull toward chaos, a hunger she had never felt before. She had seen glimpses of her power in the mountains, small and controlled, but the fortress, the storm, the rising danger, it all amplified the darkness within her. A vision struck her suddenly. Unbidden, she saw the Alpha King lying broken, cursed, his golden eyes dimmed by pain. She saw herself reaching for him, and then nothing but shadows swallowing everything. Her breath caught. She fell to her knees, trembling. The power inside her was not just a gift, it was a force that could destroy if she let it. When the Alpha King returned, the air shifted. He moved silently, like a predator who knew she was not yet ready to face him. He found her on the balcony overlooking the storm, hair whipped by wind, eyes wide with fear and determination.
"You felt it," he said quietly, stepping beside her. The curse.
The shadows. They speak to you, don't they? She did not turn to him. I saw you fall, she whispered, voice trembling. And I couldn't stop it. I couldn't save you. He placed a hand on her shoulder, steady, grounding. You are not alone in this, he said. I have faced it before, and I will face it again. But you have power I cannot control. That is why I need you by my side. I am afraid, she admitted, her voice breaking.
Afraid of myself, of the shadows, of what I might become? I cannot
be the thing you need me to be.
He turned her gently to face him, the storm reflected in his eyes, golden and fierce, yet soft with something she had not expected. Patience, trust, and a kind of longing that mirrored her own. Power is not evil, he said. It is what you do with it that matters. You can choose to fight the darkness, go, or let it fight you. But you will never be alone, not if you trust me. She shook her head, stepping back, yet the tether between them pulled stronger. Trust, she whispered bitterly. I do not know how. You will learn, he said, voice steady as the cliffs beneath them, and I will not force it. But know this, the moment you try to walk away from me, the curse grows stronger. It does not rest. It does not forgive. You cannot escape it alone. Her chest tightened. The weight of his words settled on her like a stone. She wanted to flee, to run into the mountains where shadows were her own, and danger belonged only to her. But she could not. The tether, invisible yet unbreakable, bound them, and she felt, deep inside, that leaving him now would not save either of them. The days that followed were trials of both body and heart. Rival packs had begun their movement, testing the fortress walls, sending spies to probe the Alpha King's strength and the girl's resolve. Each encounter forced her to confront the power she had once feared, to step beyond shadow into action, to embrace the abilities that had always made her different. She moved with precision, silent and swift, shadows curling around her like loyal wolves. She was faster, stronger, more aware than anyone she had ever known, and yet the weight of responsibility pressed on her. She was not just fighting for herself. She was fighting for the Alpha King, for the fortress, for a bond she did not yet understand. At night, she dreamt of him, not the king, the warrior, or the Alpha, but the man behind the golden eyes, vulnerable, haunted by a curse he could not lift, carrying burdens that would crush lesser souls. In her dreams, she reached for him, felt the warmth of his presence, and then the shadows whispered warnings, pulling her back into fear.
One evening, the Alpha King found her in the gardens, the first light of dawn casting silver across the wet leaves.
She had been sitting silently, watching the horizon, lost in thought. You cannot carry it all alone, he said, stepping beside her. The shadows, the visions, they are part of you, yes, but they are not all of you. Let me bear some of the weight. She looked at him, eyes clouded with doubt and longing. And if I fail? If I cannot control it, then I will not fail with you, he said, golden eyes softening. We will face it together, as mates, as equals. You do not need to control everything, only yourself. His words should have been enough, and in some small part, they were. But the visions would not leave her. One night, during a patrol along the cliffside, she saw them again. Visions of betrayal, of loss, of fire and blood. Her knees buckled, and she fell to the ground, trembling. The Alpha King caught her before she hit the stone. Do not fight the shadows alone, he said, lifting her with ease. I am here. Always. She buried her face in his chest, feeling the warmth, the strength, the steady beat of a heart that would not falter. For a moment, the world outside disappeared, leaving only the storm inside her and the unwavering presence of the man who had named her. But peace was fleeting. A messenger arrived at the fortress gates with a warning. An alliance of rival packs was marching toward the kingdom, stronger and more cunning than ever. And worse, whispers of the Alpha King's curse had spread beyond the walls. The girl, already marked by shadow, became a target. Her power, her bond with the Alpha, was both a threat and a temptation to enemies who would see them destroyed. The Alpha King called the council immediately, but the girl was not allowed to remain on the sidelines. "You must stand with me," he said, his voice commanding, yet carrying that rare warmth. "You have the strength to guide our people through the coming storm. Your shadows will protect. Your instincts will guide. Do not doubt yourself." She felt the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders, crushing and electrifying all at once. The fortress halls echoed with tension, the air thick with anticipation, and yet, beneath it all, there was a current of something she had never known: pride, hope, and the fragile stirrings of trust. As they prepared for the approaching forces, the Alpha King walked beside her along the cliffside. The wind whipped their cloaks around them, and the storm raged above, a reflection of the chaos to come. "You have changed," he said quietly. "Stronger than when I first found you." She shook her head, trying to hide the tremor of fear in her chest. "I am not sure I am ready."
You are, he said, eyes steady.
You will be, and if you falter, I will not leave your side.
"We face this together. Always." She wanted to believe him. She wanted to step forward into trust, into partnership, into something that felt both terrifying and beautiful. But doubt was a shadow that clung tightly, a constant companion. The night before the battle, she stood on the highest tower of the fortress, looking out at the distant fires on the horizon. Her shadows moved with her, restless, whispering of danger and choice. She felt the pull of power and the weight of love, a tension that threatened to break her in two. And then a figure emerged behind her, the Alpha King, silent, patient, watching her with eyes that held every emotion she had ever feared and longed for. "You think you walk alone," he said softly, stepping closer. "But you do not. Not now, not ever. I claim you not because I can, but because I see you. Your strength, your courage, your heart." Tears threatened her eyes, though she did not let them fall. "I am afraid," she whispered. "Then fear with me," he said, reaching for her hand. "Let it not divide us. Let it bind us. Instead, whatever comes tomorrow, we face it together."
She placed her hand in his, feeling the pulse of warmth, the certainty of bond, the tether that could not be broken.
For the first time, she realized that being his mate was not about control or fear or destiny alone. It was about trust, about the courage to step into the storm together. The horizon burned with the approaching armies, the night trembled with wind and threat. And the girl who had been given no name felt something stir deep inside her, a power tempered by trust, a shadow guided by heart, a courage born of love. The storm would come, and when it did, she would stand beside the Alpha King, not as a shadow, not as Nameless, but as something far greater, a force to protect, a partner in battle, a heart bound by destiny and choice. And yet, as the winds howled and the shadows shifted, she could not shake the sense that the coming battle would test everything she had learned, everything she had dared to trust, and everything she had begun to hope for. The fortress stood ready, the Alpha King beside her, and the night waited. The night sky was torn with fire and lightning, the horizon ablaze with the march of rival packs. The fortress, perched atop cliffs like a dark crown, shivered under the weight of the storm. Inside, the corridors were tense with anticipation. Soldiers sharpened blades, mended armor, and whispered prayers to gods who had long since grown silent. She stood at the top of the highest tower, her hair whipping in the wind, shadows curling around her like living wings. Her heart pounded in rhythm with the storm. She could feel the power inside her, raw and restless, stronger than it had ever been. The Alpha King's presence beside her was steady, unyielding, a tether that grounded her while the world trembled.
Their forces are larger than we expected, he said, voice calm but firm. Golden eyes swept the horizon, calculating, unshaken.
But numbers alone do not decide battles. Strategy, courage, and heart do. And you have all three. She shook her head, though a spark of determination lit her pale eyes.
I have shadows, she said.
Not courage, not heart. Shadows are not weakness, he replied, stepping closer. They are your strength. You just need to trust them. And yourself, the first horn sounded in the distance, low and haunting. It echoed across the cliffs, a call to war, a signal of approaching chaos. She felt it reverberate through her bones. The Alpha King turned to her, eyes soft but unwavering. Whatever happens, stay with me. Trust me, even when you fear. Trust me, and we can survive this. Her breath caught. She wanted to deny it, wanted to pull away, but the bond between them, the invisible thread that had grown over weeks of storms, trials, and whispers, was stronger than any fear. She nodded. The fortress gates opened, and the enemy emerged from the night, wolves and shifters moving with precision, their eyes glowing with challenge and intent. The air shimmered with tension, as if even the storm hesitated before the coming clash. The Alpha King led the defense with a strength born of experience and instinct. She moved beside him, her shadows flowing like ribbons of night, wrapping around enemies, guiding allies, and protecting those who could not protect themselves. Every movement, every choice, was a test of her power and her heart. At the forefront of the enemy forces stood the rival pack leaders, their expressions twisted with greed and envy. They had come to claim what they believed was rightfully theirs, the Alpha King, the fortress, and the girl who had been given no name. But they underestimated her. Shadows surged from her fingers, twisting into forms both terrifying and beautiful, striking down those who dared approach. Her heart raced, not with fear, but with a fierce clarity. She was no longer just a girl in the mountains. She was a force, a guardian, a partner to the Alpha King in every sense of the word. The battle raged through the night, storm and shadow intertwining. Lightning flashed, illuminating the clash of claws and steel, the shouts of warriors, the growls of beasts. And yet, amid the chaos, she kept her focus on him, the Alpha King, golden eyes blazing with command and concern, moving like a storm made flesh. Then the curse struck. A shadow unlike any she had faced before twisted around him, tendrils of dark energy seeking to claim his life. He faltered, just for a heartbeat, and she saw the golden light in his eyes dim, a spark of vulnerability she had never witnessed. Panic clawed at her chest, but she did not hesitate. She stepped into the darkness, letting her own shadow flow around them both, merging with his light. Fear whispered at the edges of her mind, warning her that she could be consumed, that she could fail. But trust in him, in herself, in their bond, pushed back the fear. She whispered, her voice carrying over the storm. I am here, always. The tendrils of the curse recoiled at her power, at the strength of the bond she offered. She reached for him, letting her shadow intertwine with his, creating a shield of light and dark, of trust and courage. Slowly, steadily, the curse weakened, unable to pierce the union they shared. He looked at her, awe and relief mingling in his golden eyes.
You saved me, he breathed, disbelief and gratitude breaking through the warrior's composure. No, she said, shaking her head.
We saved each other! The enemy faltered, sensing the shift. Shadows moved with precision, guiding allies, protecting the fortress, breaking the enemy lines.
And in that chaos, she felt something she had never known. Certainty. The girl who had been given no name had found her place, not in a pack, not in fear, but in a bond forged by trust and courage. As dawn began to break, the storm started to fade. The enemy had been repelled, retreating into the mountains from which they had come. The fortress, though battered, stood unbroken. Soldiers cheered, though quietly, knowing the victory had been hard won, born of strategy, courage, and the union of two hearts against darkness. The Alpha King turned to her, the first light of sunrise illuminating his golden eyes and the streaks of storm still clinging to his cloak.
"You were magnificent," he said softly, stepping closer, his hand reaching for hers.
"I could not have faced that without you." She looked at him, shadows still dancing at her fingertips, yet softened by the warmth of his presence. "And I could not have faced it without you," she replied.
I thought I was alone in this."
But I was wrong. I am not alone. Not anymore. He smiled, and it was a smile that carried every emotion he had ever hidden behind strength and command: relief, awe, admiration, and a quiet, steadfast love. "Then stay," he said simply, his hand closing over hers. "Stay with me. Not because you must, but because you choose to." Her heart thumped violently, and she felt the final threads of fear unraveling. "I choose," she whispered, tears glistening in her pale eyes. "I choose you." The fortress seemed to breathe with them, the morning sun casting golden light over stone and shadow, over the girl who had been given no name, and the Alpha King who had claimed her. They stood together atop the cliffs, hand in hand, shadows and light intertwined, a bond stronger than storm or curse, stronger than fear or fate. The days that followed were quiet, but filled with purpose. The Alpha King's curse was broken, weakened by the trust and bond they shared. Rival packs, though still wary, respected the fortress and its defenders, understanding that some forces were not to be challenged lightly. And she, the girl who had wandered nameless through mountains, now walked with purpose, with power, with heart. At night, she would sit by the balcony, watching the stars and the shadows, and he would join her. They spoke of futures, of what could be, of peace earned through courage and love. And slowly, steadily, the bond between them deepened, a connection that would endure storms and shadows alike. One evening, as the last light of day bled across the horizon, he turned to her and whispered, "Do you have a name now?" She looked at him, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "I do," she said softly.
"And it is mine. But you may say it too."
He smiled, golden eyes reflecting the twilight, and spoke her name aloud for the first time. It rolled over the cliffs and the fortress walls, carried by wind and shadow, binding them together not by law or power, but by choice and heart. "I will always say it," he whispered, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Because it belongs to you, and because it belongs to us." For the first time, she understood what it meant to belong, to be seen, to be loved without fear. She had walked through darkness, through shadows, through storms, and emerged not broken, but whole. The mountains still loomed in the distance, the shadows still whispered, but they no longer held fear for her. She had claimed her power, embraced her bond, and learned that names were not chains, but gifts. And as she stood beside the Alpha King, the first rays of sunlight illuminating their joined hands, she knew one thing with perfect clarity: the storm would come again. Shadows would rise. Challenges would return. But together, they would face whatever darkness dared to cross their path. For she was no longer nameless. She was his mate, his equal, his partner in storm and shadow. And he was hers, golden-eyed, strong and unwavering, bound by love and destiny that even the darkest curse could not undo. And in that union the fortress, the mountains, and the world itself seemed to pause and acknowledge a bond that would endure forever.